So, David Cary, High Ground Ranch Developers. I spent 30 years in wealth management at one of the largest investment banks in the world. And I realized there was a huge opportunity to make fantastic returns by solving big problems. High Ground Ranch Developers, just real quickly, is in the early stages of raising equity capital to scale regenerative ranching. If you're a real estate investor, it's like a value add strategy, but it's a better risk reward profile. If you're in private equity, it's like a distressed asset roll up, but with a better risk return profile. So I'm going to talk to you about the trends that we're seeing in the market for regenerative beef, the challenges we are having in linking them, and the opportunities if we do. So the way to find the biggest opportunities is follow the biggest trends. Baby boomers, right? The baby boomers were the dominant part of the workforce back in the early to mid 70s. Now it's Gen Y and Gen Z. During that time, for a relative comparison, our population has grown about 50%. Gen Y and Gen Z are going to be 90% larger than the boomers were at their peak. That is enough to tell you that's the trend to follow. But here's the kicker. It's estimated that they are going to inherit something north of $100 trillion from their boomer parents and grandparents. Those hippies didn't have that kind of capital. They had enough for pot and Jimi Hendrix tickets. And look at the impact they had. So this is going to be huge. Secondly, if you want to serve them, they're now your employees, they're your customers, they're your investors. And if you want them to work for you, buy from you, invest in you, you need to make products and services that improve their health while improving the health of the environment, or at least don't degrade it. If you do that, they will pay up. It is a big trend. It's growing fast. Regenerative beef and those so-called healthy drinks are the two fastest growing segments of the food business. So you've got the biggest trend with the fastest growth, and they're overpaying for it. Why is that? Partly because of what AJ mentioned. He mentioned the low supply of cattle that we have. Simple economics. The demand is growing while the supply is small. And in regenerative, fully grass-fed, grass-finished, that's still small single digits. So we have a disconnect there between the supply and demand, but we also have a disconnect in the supply chain causing a problem, and we'll talk about that. So let's start at the production facilities where the beef is manufactured. I have a friend whose company runs the books for ranches across this part of the country. And he said to me a few years ago, 9 out of 10 ranches don't make money. Even the ones that say they do or think they do, they don't. I see the books. So it's hard to make money in ranching. We need to make them more profitable, and it's also an over-leveraged situation. Our farmers and ranchers total started the year with a little over $500 billion in debt. It's expected to reach close to $600 billion just this year. We need to delever the system. When the USDA had its funding cut last year, I read an article about a farmer who was panicking he was going to lose his land because he was waiting on a $70,000 subsidy from the USDA to pay his bank loan. And I felt horrible for him, but I thought that's a horrible business model. Depending on the government and enslaved to the banks, that's the situation that we're in. So what do we do about it? Well, easy answer since you're in this room. Regenerative. Why does it help so much? It's because you're decreasing your input costs. You're less dependent on outside forces because you're growing your own system. So when Russia invaded Ukraine and wheat prices tripled, it didn't impact the regenerative ranchers as much because they were growing their own food. Fuel prices doesn't impact them as much. And when you're successful at converting to regenerative, you're going to start growing more forage. So you're going to need more animals. So you can get a larger operation, spreads the fixed costs over more animal units. So it's just a lot more profitable. That's the larger operations. That also associates with what AJ was talking about. Pull the smaller producers together in a way that creates a larger community, one larger together. And we need to delever the system. We need to bring in equity. When you have larger operations, typically around 1,000 head of cattle is where you can get significant profitability from economies of scale. We've been modeling ranches upwards of 2,000 head of cattle, showing internal rates of return of over 20% without leverage. So if we can get that kind of return for a rancher without being enslaved to the bank, we can start to create a more resilient system. Now that we fix the production facilities, the supply chain's a problem because the regenerative ranchers don't fit to that current system. The big four, JBS, Cargill, National Beef, who am I leaving out? Tyson, that's it, Tyson. They want cows now to be grown closer to 1,500 pounds. Well, that last 300 to 400 pounds is not profitable for the regenerative rancher, trying to get them enough grass to fatten them up enough. So they need to be selling off their cattle closer to 1,100 pounds. And so then they can't go to those less expensive processors. They have to go to the microprocessors that are going to be 3-4 times as expensive. So that's partly why you're paying more. On the other side of it is the retailers. Now the restaurants and grocers are having to deal with bigger cuts. Your restaurant used to sell a 12 to 16 ounce ribeye. Now are we looking at 15 to 19 ounce ribeyes when prices are at all-time highs? So now they're figuring out, do we have to come up with new cuts? So they're struggling on that end. By the way, anybody recognize that picture? Shout it out if you do. Meaning of life, Monty Python, way to go. Another baby boomer here with me. So what are the solutions in this case? Well, we've got direct-to-consumer, which is what a lot of people are doing nowadays. The ranchers, since they go to the processors themselves, they'll take it back, and then they'll sell the beef on their own site. The great thing about that is it's not as close as what Juan was talking to be able to touch the ground, but you can see the person who's making your food, see where it's being made, how it's being made. So it does pull them closer to the consumer when you're buying direct from the supplier, from the rancher. If you've never done this, I would challenge you to go online and see if you can buy, don't do it right now when I'm done talking, go online and see if you can find regenerative beef that you want to order. If you can fill out your exact order, I'll bet you can't do it because they're so small, you have to take what they can get. It'll often be a box of various cuts that they have available. It may not be exactly what you want, so it's a challenge. So one way to get around that is the aggregators, AJ, where they pull multiple groups together. You have a better chance of getting what you want. Lastly, I'm going to throw out a new idea. Maybe it's a new supply chain. The supply chain we have has been around for decades. The same system. You put a cow on the truck goes off to the processing facility. The beef gets stressed because of the adrenaline while the cow's on the truck. Put it on a feedlot a couple days to fatten it back up. Take it into where it's taken down. They slice the throat, put it on a hook, slice it down the middle, all the icky stuff falls out. They spray it with acid, move it into a chill room. Now imagine a big room with all the energy it takes to chill these carcasses down. Then it goes into a cutting room. Then it goes into another big chill room, a lot more energy, where it sits for days while it's aged. High Ground Ranch Developers has 7 patents on a technology that will eliminate everything but the cutting room. And it's perfect for the small ranchers. You take the cow down at the ranch, so it's more humane. It chills the carcass from the inside out, ages the beef in hours while it's on its way to the processing. We're working on technology now to remove the ingesta from the system so we can save 250 pounds of unnecessary transport weight. You can push, I won't get into the details. We'll be able to make Wagyu-like equivalents out of the hind cuts, the lower quality cuts. All of this with 1/15 the energy. What that does is it drives more margin to the rancher, more margin to the processor in a way that'll drive the price down to the consumer and will be competitive with the big four. Last piece, that cutting room, AJ's working on robotics technology, not to replace humans, but because he can't find humans for his processing. They don't want the job. So he's looking at robotics that are the equivalent of about $2 an hour for operations. So think out a new supply chain. Not that we have the answer, but that's one of the ways we need to start reconnecting the rancher directly to the consumer. The demand is out there. We figured out how to make the production facilities, and if you can do that, the returns that can come from that are huge. So we need your help. Thanks.